Hello students, welcome back once again to your botany class. And so today I would like to start with a new unit, the cell biology, the unit 3 and the chapter 8 of your textbook. And so this cell biology, the part A consists of 12 marks and part B 12 marks. So in total it will be 24 marks. So I suggest you to have an in-depth knowledge about this unit and so that you can have good scoring. Okay. This cell biology or the cell, it's derived from a Latin word cella, means hollow space, and we all know that living organisms we composed of a cell. All living organisms, they are composed of cells, and it says that it's about a human body has about 300 trillion cells. So all living organisms are composed of cells, and no life cannot exist below the level of a cell. Life cannot exist below the level of a cell. So all living organisms, be it microscopic organisms or gigantic trees or even the large animals like the blue whale, we are all composed of cells. And this, accordingly, depending upon the number of cells, some organisms may be composed of a single cell and they are called as unicellular organisms, and some organisms are composed of more than one cell, and those organisms are called as multicellular organisms. So accordingly, they are unicellular and multicellular organisms depending upon the number of cells. So these unicellular organisms, they are composed of a single cell, and this single cell performs all the vital activities of life, and this single cell is capable of independent existence. Example is that of the most prominent example or important example is that of bacteria. So bacteria is a unicellular organism and it's composed of a single cell, and the cell itself performs all the vital functions of life. While in case of multicellular organisms, in these multicellular organisms, there is division of labor among the cells. There is division of labor among the cells. Different cells perform different functions, or different cells perform specific functions. So unicellular and multicellular. Multicellular organisms are human beings, plants, animals, fungi, etc. Okay. So this cell was first observed by Robert Hooke. Okay, Robert Hooke in 1665, he observed cell in a slice of cork. In a slice of cork, this cork you usually find that it's a piece of wood that is soft wood that is used as a cap in case of bottles in the lab or even in drinks. You find that there's a soft wood that is used as a cap that is called a cork. Okay, so he observed a slice of cork, and he observed that this cork they resembles like box-like compartments. He observed that there are box-like compartments resembling a honeycomb. So he calls those box-like compartments resembling honeycomb as cells. But these cells were dead cells. Nevertheless, later on he went even further on to discover even the nucleus. Okay, so Anton von Leeuwenhoek, later on he observed the first living cells. Okay. So in the 19th century, discoveries were made, and observations were done, discoveries were made, theories were put up forward, and subsequently in 1838, Schleiden, a German botanist, observed that all plants are made up of cells. All plants are made up of cells. And in 1839, Swan, a British zoologist, he studied the different cells of animals, and he observed that all the animal cells, they have a thin outer membrane. They have a thin outer membrane, which today is known as the plasma membrane. Okay, so these two scientists, Schleiden and Swan, they proposed the cell theory. Okay, they proposed the cell theory, but the cell theory of these two scientists was not accepted by many because they could not explain how new cells were formed. They could not explain, the cell theory could not explain how new cells were formed. Then in the year 1855, Rudolf Virchow, he stated that omnis cellula. He stated that new cells arises from the pre-existing cells, and he put up a cell theory which today is known as the modern cell theory. So in his modern cell theory of this Rudolf Virchow, he stated that all organisms are composed of cells and products of cells. All organisms are composed of cells and products of cells, and new cells arises from the pre-existing cells, or the cells divide and give rise to new cells. So all new cells arises from pre-existing cells. So that was the cell theory which was proposed by Rudolf Virchow, and today it's known as the modern cell theory. Okay, so now with this basic idea, and organisms were again classified into prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Okay. So as I've discussed, some organisms, they are composed of single cells, some are composed of many cells, trillion, million, and trillions of cells. And so the size of the cells in organisms varies. The size, it can range from microscopic, which cannot be seen with the naked eyes, to a cell like, for example, the ostrich egg is considered as the largest cell, so which can be observed with the eye, naked eyes, while in case of the microscopic or the smallest cell, like the pleuropneumonia-like organisms, which cannot be observed by the naked eye, it has to be observed through a very powerful microscope. So the size of cells varies from microscope to a large size. Okay, so organisms on the basic constituent of the cell is divided into prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Depending upon the complexity of the cell, organisms are of two groups or two categories, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So these prokaryotes are supposed to be the most primitive group of organisms, prokaryotes. And again, the example can be that of bacteria. So example of prokaryotes is bacteria, and example of prokaryotes which have a high degree of organization in the cell. Example of that can be a plant cell, it can be a plant or animal, or for that matter, it can be even that of a fungal cell. Okay, so the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes is that the cell size in prokaryotes are comparatively smaller. They are smaller in size as compared to eukaryotic cells, and in prokaryotes, nuclear membrane is absent, while in eukaryotes, nuclear membrane is present. So this nuclear membrane, you know that the genetic material or the DNA is present within the nucleus, and it's bonded by a membrane known as the nuclear membrane. That is what we know when it comes to genetics. But that nuclear membrane covering which surrounds the genetic material or the DNA is absent in case of bacteria. So the genetic material is naked. While in prokaryotes, the nuclear membrane, a membrane which surrounds the genetic material is present. As such, in case of prokaryotes, true nucleus is absent, while in case of eukaryotes, due to the presence of nuclear membrane, the genetic material is well protected by the nuclear membrane, and as such, a true nucleus is present, while in case of prokaryotes, it is absent. Then, in case of prokaryotes, the genetic material is in the form of a single circular naked chromosome. Okay, the genetic material or the DNA is in the form of a single circular chromosome which lies in the center of the cell, known as the nucleoid region. While in case of eukaryotes, the genetic material is in the form of more than one chromosome, and they are present within the nucleus. The genetic material is more than one chromosome, or more than one DNA. For example, there are 23 pairs of chromosome in human cell. So the genetic material is more than one, and they are present in the nucleus, or they are present within the nucleus of the cell, a nucleoplasm. Okay, and in this case, in prokaryotes, nucleus is absent, while in case of eukaryotes, nucleus is present. And another significant difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes is that in case of prokaryotes, membrane-bound organelles absent. As we go detailedly into the study of the cell structure, we find that, for example, in case of a plant cell, you know the process of photosynthesis, and that process of photosynthesis takes place in special cell organelles known as plastids or chloroplasts. So those are plastids or chloroplasts, or even for that matter mitochondria, which is known as the powerhouse of the cell. They are known as membrane-bound organelles. Organelles having membrane, and they have a definite structure, while those membrane-bound organelles are absent in case of prokaryotes. Membrane-bound organelles are absent in prokaryotes, while they are present in eukaryotes. So these are certain differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. In size, prokaryotes are comparatively smaller as compared to the eukaryotic cells, and nuclear membrane is absent in case of prokaryotes, while it is present in eukaryotes. Due to the absence of a nuclear membrane, a true nucleus is absent in prokaryotes, while it is present in eukaryotic cells, and the genetic material or the DNA is in the form of a single circular chromosome, which lies in the center of the cell known as the nucleus. And in case of eukaryotic cells, the genetic material is more than one chromosome and is associated with proteins, RNAs, and they are present within the nucleus. And nucleus is absent in case of prokaryotes or prokaryotic cells, while it's present in these eukaryotic cells, and this nucleus is responsible for synthesizing types of RNA. And these membrane-bound organelles like plastids, chloroplasts, mitochondria, they are absent in case of or Golgi complex, they are absent in case of prokaryotic cells, while they are present in prokaryotic cells and they perform different functions. So accordingly with this, the eukaryotic cells are further divided into plant cells and animal cells. Plant cells, these eukaryotic cells exhibit a degree of complexity and organization, and they are basically of two types, plant cells and animal cells. And you know, one of the most significant difference between a plant cell and an animal cell is the presence and absence of cell wall. This cell wall, which is the outermost covering, which forms as a protective covering, protecting the internal components of the cell, is present in plant cell, and it is absent in case of animal cell. So this cell wall gives rigidity, shape to the plant cell, while in case of animal, it is absent. So in case of these animal cells, the outermost covering will be that of the plasma membrane because of the absence of cell. Then of course, plant cell, next to the plant cell is the plasma membrane, which forms a second layer or the second wall, while in case of the animal cells, the plasma membrane forms the outermost covering of the cell. Then next is that presence and absence of plastids. Plastids or chloroplasts, they are responsible for photosynthesis, and because of the presence of this pigment chlorophyll in the plastids and chloroplasts, the plants are able to prepare their own food and subsequently their food for all the living organisms on this earth. So plastids or chloroplasts, they are present in plant cells and they are absent in case of animal cells. So due to the absence of plastids, the animals, of which we are also a part of it, we have to depend upon the plants for our survival. And the next is, in case of plant cells, there is a large central vacuole, or there's a large central vacuole, while in case of animal cells, instead of a large central vacuole, there are many vacuoles which are scattered in the cytoplasm of the cell. And the other difference is that in case of plant cells, Golgi complex, they are, in animal cells, Golgi complex is highly organized. The Golgi complex, they are highly organized, and in case of plant cells, that level of organization in case of plant cell is absent. This Golgi complex does not exhibit a high degree of organization, and in fact, in plant cells, they are known as dictyosomes. They are present as dictyosomes, and in case of animal cells, central is present, while centrals are absent in case of plant cells. So Centrals are absent in case of plant cells, and in case of animal cells, the centrals are present, and they are present in the form of polar capes. So these are some of the, besides this, there are also other differences which we'll be dealing with later detailedly in the next few classes. So these are some of the basic differences between plant cell and animal cell. Plant cell consists of cell wall. It has a cell wall which gives shapes and protection and rigidity. It's absent in case of animal cell. Plastids, which is responsible for the presence of the pigment chlorophyll, which helps in the process of photosynthesis, is present in plant cell, absent in animal cell. Then a large central vacuole is present in the cell, in the center of the cell, which contains a cell sap. It's present in plant cell, while in case of animal cells, the vacuoles are scattered in the cytoplasm of the cell. While in case of animal cells, the Golgi complex is organized, and in case of plant cells, they are scattered and they are known as dichthyosomes, and centrals are absent in plant cells while they are present in case of animal cells. So these are some of the basic differences between plant cell and animal cell. Okay, so just before we wind up this class, let's briefly look into the topic again. Cell derived from two Greek words. Cella means hollow space. So it was first observed in 1665 by Robert Hooke in a slice of cork, and he observed that the cells were dead, and the first living cells were observed by Anton von Leeuwenhoek, and he observed the first living cells. Nevertheless, the term cell was given by Robert Hooke in 1665, and the first cell theory was proposed by Schleiden and Schwann. However, the theory could not explain the existence, how new cells were formed, and therefore it was rejected. And subsequently, in the year 1855, Rudolf Virchow, he proposed that modern cell theory, and he stated omnis cellula cellula, which means that new cells arises from the pre-existing cells, or all cells divide as such. They give rise to new cells, and depending upon the number of cells in an organisms are unicellular, multicellular. Unicellular organisms composed of a single cell, multicellular organisms composed of a number of cells, and unicellular, the single cell in unicellular organisms, they perform all the vital functions of life, while in case of multicellular organisms, there's division of labor. The different cells perform different functions or specific functions, and the size of cells can vary from microscopic to that of like a cell of an ostrich. And according to the complexity of the cell, organisms are of two types, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And so in prokaryotes, the size are smaller as compared to eukaryotic cells. Nuclear membrane is absent, true nucleus is absent, genetic materials in the form of a single circular chromosome present in the center of the cell known as the nucleus, and membrane-bound organelles are absent, nucleolus is absent, while in eukaryotic cells, the size are comparatively larger. Nuclear membrane is present, a true nucleus is present, and genetic material consists of more than one chromosome or DNA. And membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria, chloroplast, Golgi complex, then endoplasmic reticulum, they are present in case of eukaryotic cells. And in prokaryotic cells, nucleolus is absent, and prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells undergoes mitotic and meiotic divisions, while prokaryotic does not. They undergo division by means of budding and fission. And eukaryotic cells, they are further classified into two types, animal cells and plant cells. And in case of plant cells, cell wall, plastids present, absent in case of animal cells, cell wall and plastids are absent. And in plant cells, a large central vacuole is present, while in case of animal, it is the vacuoles are scattered. Golgi complex, in case of plant cells, they are known as dichthyosomes, and central is absent in case of plant cells, while in case of animal cells, Golgi complex is highly organized and centrals are present in the form of polar capes. So this is the basic general idea about the cell, and in the next few classes, we'll go detailedly into different types of cells of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So please come back and join the class again. Thank you.